Does getting what you want actually make you take action? We intuitively assume that the exact moment we receive a reward, that glorious first sip of morning coffee, winning a hand in a card game, or seeing that bright red notification pop up on our phone, is the precise moment our brain chemically reinforces our behavior. But the neurological reality is far more counterintuitive and, frankly, a whole lot more fascinating. The human brain actually spikes its highest levels of dopamine not when we receive a reward, but in the immediate anticipation of it. It's the craving, not the fulfillment, that serves as the true biological engine driving literally every single routine, compulsion, and habit in our daily lives. So, what does this all mean? Well, by understanding this exact neurological sequence, we can start to decode the seemingly invisible forces that dictate our days. We are going to completely deconstruct the biological mechanics of habit formation. We'll look closely at how behaviors are born, how they are neurologically reinforced in mere fractions of a second, and most importantly, how we can systematically manipulate this underlying biology using 4 simple laws to design vastly better routines. Part 1. The Law of Effect. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to the year 1898. Long before we were measuring dopamine spikes in a laboratory using advanced brain scans, the foundational science of why we repeat certain actions was already being established. A psychologist named Edward Thorndike was highly interested in studying animal behavior, and he set up an experiment that was just brilliantly simple. He took hungry cats and placed them inside a device known as a puzzle box. This box was specifically designed so that the cat could escape through a door by performing a single, simple act, like pressing a lever or stepping on a specific platform. Once that door opened, the cat could dart out and eat from a bowl of food. Now, at first, the animals behaved exactly as you would expect a trapped cat to behave: poorly. They wanted out immediately, they'd furiously and randomly poke their noses into corners, stick their paws through openings, and claw at loose objects in pure frustration. But eventually, after a few minutes of this completely random exploration, the cats would accidentally press the magical lever. The door would pop open, and they'd escape to their reward. Now, what's truly mind-blowing here is what happened as Thorndike tracked these behaviors across multiple trials with the exact same cats. During the first few attempts, the animals took an average of about 1.5 minutes to escape. But as the trials progressed, the cats stopped their random clawing. They began to associate the specific action of pressing the lever with the reward of the food. The behavior became intensely automated. By the last 3 trials, the average time it took a cat to escape dropped to a staggering 6.3 seconds. Think about that. Rather than repeating past mistakes, the brain simply cut straight to the solution. It's actually the exact same automated process your brain uses today when you type in a complex computer password without even looking at your fingers. Thorndike perfectly captured the core of this whole experiment with an observation that became known as the law of effect. He wrote that behaviors followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated, and those that produce unsatisfying consequences are less likely to be repeated. It proves that our brains are incredibly efficient reward detectors, constantly analyzing which actions are useful and quickly discarding the ones that aren't. This simple, elegant psychological rule is the true origin story of every single routine you have. Part 2. The 4-Step Habit Loop. Building on that 19th century foundation, modern behavioral science has actually mapped this learning process out into a precise chronological framework. It's basically an endless feedback loop running in our brains during every waking moment, processing our environment in fractions of a second. All habits proceed through 4 distinct stages in the exact same order: cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue triggers the brain to initiate a behavior because it predicts a reward. The craving is the motivational force. It's that deep desire to change your internal state. The response is the actual habit being performed. And finally, the reward satisfies that craving and teaches your brain to remember the specific sequence for the future. If a behavior falls short in any of these 4 stages, it simply will never become a habit. Let's bring this abstract neurological scanning system down to earth and map it onto a highly relatable daily routine. Imagine waking up and walking into your kitchen. First, there's the cue. You notice the glowing time on the stove clock and realize, yep, it's morning. This triggers a craving. You want to feel alert and shake off that heavy morning grogginess. Now, it's absolutely vital to realize here that the craving isn't for the bitter, dark bean water itself. It's a deep biological desire for the change in internal state, that sweet relief from exhaustion that the coffee provides. Next is the response. You go through the familiar automated physical motions of brewing the coffee. And finally, the reward. You drink it, you satisfy your intense craving for alertness, and your brain firmly associates the physical act of drinking coffee with the cue of waking up. Ultimately, this loop breaks down into 2 very distinct cognitive phases.
You see, the habit loop is fundamentally a problem-solving mechanism. The first half, the cue and the craving, is the problem phase. This happens when your brain perceives your environment and realizes that something needs to change, whether that's getting your hands on something good or relieving some kind of pain. The second half, the response and the reward, is the solution phase. This is where you actually take action and achieve that desired change in state. We cycle through this problem-solution dynamic thousands of times a day, entirely on autopilot without our conscious minds ever once registering the math.
Part 3. Dopamine and craving anticipation. Now, to truly grasp the sheer power of that problem phase and why a simple cue in our environment can generate such an overwhelming motivation to act, we have to look closely at the neurobiology of desire. When we track the neurological activity of a learned habit, the data reveals a spectacular truth. Notice the massive spike in the brain's dopamine levels. That peak doesn't happen when the reward is received at the end of the loop. It happens earlier, immediately after the cue is recognized, right during the craving stage. Once the brain learns a habit, it anticipates the outcome. And it is this anticipation, this massive biological surge of dopamine, that actually forces you into motion. If that dopamine doesn't rise, the motivation to act simply doesn't exist. This underlying biology brings us to a wildly fascinating phenomenon known as cue-induced wanting. This means that external triggers alone can stimulate the brain's reward pathways and spark intense desire, completely bypassing our conscious control. For a gambling addict, just hearing the sound of a slot machine causes a massive dopamine surge. In clinical studies, showing addicts a picture of cocaine for just 33 milliseconds, which is a speed entirely invisible to conscious thought, is enough to heavily stimulate the reward pathway. The brain interprets the cue in a fraction of a second and instantly floods the system with a craving. All of this points to a massive, critical distinction in our neurobiology, the immense difference between wanting an outcome and actually liking it. The reward system activated when you receive a reward is the exact same system activated when you anticipate it. However, the human brain dedicates significantly more neural real estate to the process of wanting. The centers for craving and desire are heavily prioritized over the centers for actually enjoying the reward. And evolution engineered us exactly this way, because desire is the engine of action. Our ancient ancestors needed an intense, overwhelming drive to forage, to hunt, and to survive, not just the capacity to sit back and casually enjoy a meal. Anticipation is biologically designed to be a stronger sensation than fulfillment, because without that intense desire to act, organisms simply wouldn't survive. Part 4. The 4 Laws of Behavior Change. All right, so knowing that our brains are completely hardwired to run on this cue, craving, response, and reward sequence, how do we actually use this biology to our advantage? We can translate this entire neurological reality into a highly actionable, practical framework for designing better routines. By mapping each biological step to a practical rule, we get 4 levers that influence human behavior. If you want to build a good habit, you must align with the loop. Step 1, the cue. You must make it obvious, like setting your gym shoes right next to your bed so you literally can't miss them. Step 2, the craving. Knowing dopamine drives action, you must make it attractive by maybe pairing your workout with your absolute favorite podcast. Step 3, the response. You must make it easy to reduce friction, like choosing a gym that is directly on your commute home. And step 4, the reward. You must make it satisfying to close the feedback loop, perhaps by tracking your progress with a really satisfying red X on a wall calendar. When these 4 levers are in the right position, creating positive behavior becomes nearly effortless because you're working with your biology, not against it. And here is the brilliant part. By systematically inverting those exact same biological laws, we get the ultimate blueprint for dismantling our negative behaviors. To break a bad habit, you attack the loop at every single stage. For the cue, make it invisible. Remove the trigger from your environment entirely, like putting the junk food out of sight in the garage. For the craving, make it unattractive. For the response, make it difficult. Add high amounts of friction, like leaving your phone in another room while you sleep so you can't just mindlessly scroll in bed. And for the reward, make it unsatisfying. By intentionally starving the loop of its triggers, its dopamine, its ease, and its satisfaction, the behavior simply cannot survive. This all culminates in a modern, updated, cardinal rule of behavior change. To truly cement a habit, we have to account for our evolutionary wiring. Our brains don't just want satisfaction, they demand instant gratification. Therefore, what is immediately rewarded is repeated, and what is immediately punished is avoided. Immediate reinforcement is the absolute key to maintaining motivation and locking a behavior into your neurological circuitry while you wait for those big, long-term benefits to accrue. Whether you are analyzing a cat trying to escape from a puzzle box back in 1898, or you're trying to engineer your own optimal morning routine today, the underlying machinery is exactly the same. The secret to changing your life isn't about relying on sheer willpower. It's about respecting the biological mechanisms that run it. So take a close look at your own daily routines. Are you the purposeful architect of your environment, or are you just a cat in a puzzle box reacting to whatever levers happen to be placed in front of you? Because ultimately, every habit is initially formed because of a simple cue, craving response, reward loop.